UFC 278 betting and DraftKings show. We have 13 fights this Saturday. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the flyweight division, we have Victor Altamirano coming in as a minus 165 favorite. The comeback on Daniel Lacerda is plus 140. And this is a fight that I think is going to be fireworks from the moment it starts, because Victor Altamirano is kind of like a budget version of Brandon Royval. He's going to spam leg kicks repeatedly. You know, he's going to push a high pace. The difference between him and Daniel Lacerda, who can also push a high pace, is Altamirano can do it longer than a few minutes. Like, Lacerda is going to come out there fast, try to get you out of there early. If he's unable to do that, the guy just falls apart. We see it time and time again. He's 0-2 in the UFC. Both times he was finished in those losses. So even though Altamirano is not much of a big finisher, I do think he probably gets a finish here in round 2, maybe round 3 if it lasts that far, but I'd be surprised here, just because I think Lacerda's going to come at him, try to finish him early. If he's unable to do that, then I think he's just going to wilt under the pressure of Altamirano. So I have Altamirano by submission in round 2. That's the official pick, and this is a solid fight to target on DraftKings because I just think the winner's going to score well either way. Next fight up, we have Richie coming in as a minus 145 favorite. The comeback on Perrin is plus 125, and this is going to be my first bet of the night. I have Perrin for a unit at plus 134 on FanDuel. I think pretty much any plus money is probably not bad on the Perrin side. I just think he could have multiple advantages here. Richie coming off a first round knockout over Cameron Else, and yes, he does have a little bit of power early in fights, but Cameron Else is a very kill or be killed style of fighter as well, pretty fragile as well, so I'm not going to put too much stock into that. And on the flip side, Perrin seems to be pretty durable. He's fought respectable competition across the regional scene, made his short notice debut against Mario Batista, looked okay in that fight, and Batista is a guy that I put a decent amount of respect in, and Perrin was able to take him down multiple times, have some success in the striking as well. And Richie is going to look to pressure him, but the dude does not have any form of defense. He just gets hit with jabs repeatedly. I think Perrin could even have a striking advantage here, especially outside of round 1, because we know Richie historically tends to slow down as the fight goes on, and he could be taken down himself. You know, he only defends at about 60%. Durden was able to take him down multiple times there, so I think that could be a path for Perrin here as well, but I also think he could be the better striker here across 15 minutes, so I like the underdog here. He's going to be my preferred play on DraftKings as well. Up next in the flyweight division, we have Amir Albazi, a minus 435 favorite. The comeback on Francisco Figueiredo is plus 350, and Amir Albazi, yes, it's a steep price tag to pay, but the dude has looked to have the goods throughout his 2 UFC fights. He's a 14-1 prospect with just 1 career loss coming against Jose Shorty Torres over in the regional scene. His striking seems to be pretty decent, does have a little bit of power, but it's really the ground game that has been really impressive throughout his 2 UFC fights, where he's able to not only take guys down, but he's excellent in the scrambles. He's very good at beating his opponents to the positions on the mat. He's got 8 submission victories. I think he could possibly make this number 9 here against Francisco Figueiredo, who I've never put a ton of stock into. Yes, he got that first round finish over Daniel Lacerda, had the knee bar in the first round, but again, not putting too much stock into that. You look at him skill for skill, I just don't think he matches up well against Amir Albazi here. Francisco Figueiredo has been a guy that has relied on his takedowns throughout the UFC. I'm not sure that they're going to be here against Amir Albazi, who I expect to just be the stronger grappler of the 2, better in the clinch as well. And the gas tank issue is big for me because Figueiredo always fades in his fights. He cannot push a hard 15 pace here. So I just think Albazi kind of just has him covered and probably finds a finish if Figueiredo does gas out like I expect him to. So Albazi's going to be the pick. He's a solid target on DraftKings as well, but we've got a lot of people in that expensive price range that are looking pretty good this week. So it's just going to be kind of one of those decision points of who you want to pay up for in the top range on DraftKings. Which brings us to our next fight. We have AJ Fletcher, my guy, coming in as a minus 155 favorite. The comeback on Ange Lusa is plus 135, and this is an interesting matchup because both these guys fought on Contender Series last season. I had bets on both of these guys on Contender Series. Obviously, Fletcher came through with a big knockout victory. Lusa came up short, but he fought Jack Della Maddalena, who has looked great throughout his UFC run so far. And then obviously Lusa made his short notice UFC debut against Moner Laziz, where he basically just got picked apart for 15 minutes. And Moner Laziz definitely started to put it on him in that last round there. But Ange Luis, I think, is really just he's kind of solid everywhere, but he's really just not going to overwhelm guys. Like, it seems like he clearly has the power, but he just, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to let his hands go and really go for it. And that is concerning for his skill set. Like, he's just kind of a guy that could be competitive, but doesn't necessarily, isn't going to blow you away or isn't going to convincingly win rounds unless he mixes in the takedowns, which we've seen him do at times in a regional scene. I don't think that's going to be a path for him here against AJ Fletcher. The positive note that I'll say for Lusa is a lot of the reasons why he's struggled in that Madalena fight and the Laziz fight is because of their jab. They're both longer fighters. That's not going to be a factor here against AJ Fletcher, who has those short little T-Rex arms, but he is very, very powerful. He's just not much of a guy with a strong jab. So at least defensively speaking, I think Lusa won't look as bad, but I also just don't think he can make Fletcher pay, whereas Fletcher has all of the upside. You know, he's got freak athleticism. He puts everything he has into his strikes, even the leg kicks he's whipping his entire body into. I think he has all the knockout upside, and yes, Lusa's been pretty durable so far, but we've also saw him rocked multiple times on Contender Series. We saw him stung once or twice against Laziz as well, so it's not like I think the guy's indestructible, and Fletcher just has that, like, just crazy knockout type of upside, but he also has a potential grappling edge here as well. You know, he doesn't come from a wrestling background, but he's shown the ability to land takedowns. He has those powerful double legs, and just being the shorter fighter with the wider base should be able to get in on the hips of Lusa. But I also think Lusa's takedown defense is a little bit underrated, so that could be, you know, a way that he potentially gasses out Fletcher if he's defense off the takedowns. Fletcher's gas tank didn't look great in his UFC debut, but it's just a kind of things where I just go back and forth here, so I'm probably not going to bet either guy at the money line. Maybe look to target a knockout prop or some sort of prop on AJ Fletcher, and he's definitely my preferred play on DraftKings because I just think all of the upside kind of lies on the Fletcher side of this one. Next fight up, we have Miranda Maverick coming in as one of the biggest favorites on the card at -600. The comeback on Shayna Young is +450. And these two actually fought an exhibition match back in Invicta in 2019. And Miranda Maverick submitted her in round one. I'm not saying that that's going to happen here, but I still think Miranda Maverick was clearly the better fighter the first time they fought. I think she's probably made more improvements than Young has since then, and I think she's clearly still the better fighter, especially when you factor in the grappling, where Shayna Young, yes, she was able to get the finish against Gina Mazzani, but that was basically just because Gina Mazzani super gassed out after completely dominating her in round one with the wrestling. So that's always going to be a leak for Shayna Young. She fought on Contender Series a couple years ago, was out-grappled by Sarah Alpar, who was cut by the UFC, was basically no good. She was able to dominate Shayna Young on the mat. So I definitely think Miranda Maverick can do so. She can hit multiple takedowns here, control her on the mat, potentially find a finish as well. And even in the striking, like, I favor Miranda Maverick striking. I think she has the better striking here. Muay Thai base. Shayna Young is just kind of an awkward striker. She has some heavy leg kicks, but her movement's just not very good. She can't defend takedowns. I don't really think she's all that talented, and I think Miranda Maverick just has her covered everywhere. So Maverick by submission, I guess, would be the official pick here, but she's going to be the play on DraftKings as well. Next fight up, we have Sean Woodson coming in as a -340 favorite with Luis Saldana on the comeback at +280, and I gotta say, I like the Sean Woodson side here. I just think he's all around a better striker than Luis Saldana. Saldana is a guy who's basically relied on his range. You know, he has a lot of good kicks at range. He's relied on that length. He's going to throw a lot of kicking attacks, spinning attacks as well. But this guy slows down in every single one of his fights. We've seen him hurt to the body repeatedly, and that cardio just is not going to hold up for 15 minutes, even if you don't try to grapple him. And on the Sean Woodson side, his cardio is pretty solid. You know, this is a guy that pushes a high volume striking pace. He has that credentialed boxing background. I just think he's a much better striker. I think he can rip the body here, potentially hurt Saldana there, but I just think he's going to overwhelm him, pour on the volume late as Saldana starts to fade, and potentially get a finish. So I like Woodson by knockout here in the +250 range, and I don't mind sprinkling a little bit on the late round props of Sean Woodson, depending on what numbers we can get. I'm waiting on FanDuel to release those props, but I definitely like the Woodson side, and he's my preferred play on DraftKings as well. Next fight up, we have Jared Flash Gordon coming in as minus 265 favorite with Leo Santos on the comeback at plus 225. And Leo Santos, like, I'm out on this guy at this point. Like, he's 42 years old. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He basically almost finished Clay Guida in his last fight, and then could barely stand on his own 2 feet, had no cardio left. High-level black belt submission grappler, got choked out by Clay Guida there. Obviously not a great look, but it really just came down to the cardio, and I think that's key here in a matchup against Jared Gordon, who basically pushes a pace for 15 minutes if the fight lasts that long, and he's got cardio for days. So I just think that's the biggest factor in this fight, where even if Santos can have a little bit of success early, I just think it's only a matter of time before he fades away and Gordon takes over here. So could be a potential live betting spot if Santos, maybe rocks Gordon early but doesn't put him away. Then you can get on Gordon live after round 1, something like that. I mean, that's an ideal scenario. I don't know if that'll happen, but really the only concern on the Gordon side is that durability, because he's been knocked out a handful of times, doesn't really react well to getting hit at this stage in his career, and Santos is going to swing with power in that first round. So he really just needs to make it out of the first, and then I think he dominates him here and should get his hand raised here. So I like the Gordon side. He's a sizable favorite, but I think it's right. Next fight up in the heavyweight division, we have Alexander Romanov, a minus 345 favorite. The comeback on Marcin Tybura is plus 285. And this should be an interesting matchup because on one hand, we have Marcin Tybura, who's coming off the loss against Alexander Volkov. Volkov stuffed 16 takedown attempts by Tybura in that fight. Going back over his last 9 or 10 fights, anytime he's landed a takedown, he's won the fight. Anytime he can't get the wrestling going and hasn't landed a takedown, he's lost that fight. And so I do think there's a potential path for him to put Romanov on his back here. The problem is he has to avoid getting taken down and smashed out himself on the mat, because Tybura's been knocked out a handful of times. He's never been submitted. But with a guy like Romanov on top of you, who's relentless with taking you down, who's very heavy on top, whether it's smashing ground and pound or looking for some of his favorite submissions, he's very dangerous. He has a lot of round 1 finishing equity. But there are still some concerns with the gas tank of Romanov. We saw in the Juan Espino fight, the cardio was definitely getting away from him, but also the defensive wrestling. Like, the guy does not look as deadly if you can put him on his back. So I totally get the angle for the big underdog play for Marcin Tybura. I'm probably not going to get there myself, because I do just think the most likely outcome is Romanov is able to relentlessly take him to the ground and probably find a finish in round 1. So obviously Romanov, one of the better targets on DraftKings. It does come with a little bit of risk here, but I'm okay with taking that risk and taking an overweight stance on this fight as a whole. And before we get to the pay-per-view portion, guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to grow my channel, and just doing those 2 things and leaving a comment goes a really long way. I definitely appreciate it. Kicking off the pay-per-view, we have Tyson Pedro coming in as a minus 730 favorite. The comeback on Harry Hunsucker is plus 530, and I have no idea why this fight is on the pay-per-view main card. For whatever reason, we have Harry Hunsucker moving down from heavyweight to light heavyweight. The dude just simply doesn't belong at the UFC level. He was knocked out on Contender Series by Jared Vanderaa. He got a UFC shot anyway. He's been finished in the first round in both of those fights. All 5 of his professional losses. He has a 7-5 professional record, all 5 coming by knockout. So that's clearly a weakness in his game. He's basically just going to try to take your head off early. Doesn't really have the cardio or the durability to last if he doesn't find that early kill shot. And he's going up against a guy in Tyson Pedro, who's coming off the finish against Ike Villanueva, his return fight after 3.5 years of layoff there due to injury and whatnot. So I think this is clearly a setup fight for Tyson Pedro. The problem why I'm not like just all in Tyson Pedro on DraftKings is because the guy's not historically like super aggressive in terms of the striking. Like, yes, he was able to land a bunch of leg kicks against Ike Villanueva there, and I think he could land a bunch of leg kicks here, and I think he probably still finds the knockout shot in round 1, but I'm not like just going all in DraftKings, because I do think he's more of a patient fighter. This guy's actually known more for his grappling as well, and that's a potential path. If he takes Hunsucker down, I think he could submit him as well. But I'm just saying, like, if he comes with that slow approach like he did in the Villanueva fight, there's a chance this could make it into round 2, maybe not see a ton of volume to where he doesn't really crush at his salary on DraftKings. So I'm just saying it's an obvious setup fight for him, but I'm just giving the caution to why I wouldn't just lock button him on DraftKings. Either way, I do think he probably gets the finish here. We'll say by TKO on the mat, but either way, I think he gets his hand raised. And up next, another questionable fight to have on the main pay-per-view card. We have Lucie Pudilova making her return to the UFC. She was released back in 2020. She's put together a nice little streak on the regional scene. Now she's back. She's a -120 favorite against Yanan Wu on the comeback at +100. And this is a fight that I want no part of in terms of DraftKings because I just don't really see a ceiling for either fighter, but also I just don't really want to bet a money line here because I just think both of them kind of match up similarly in a sense where they're not going to pour on a ton of volume. Neither of them proactively looks to grapple much. So I just think we have a close-ish kickboxing fight for 15 minutes where it's not super clear on who's winning the rounds because neither of them have significant power. So I just think it's going to come down to whatever the judges are seeing. That's not something that I want to put my money on. Where I'd rather put my money is on the over, even the over 2.5 at -350. I think that's a big number, but I think there's still potentially value there. I have this going the distance like 92% of the time because 11 of Pudilova's last 12 fights have all gone the distance. Wu Yanan's fought in the UFC 5 times. The only one that didn't go the full 15 minutes was the first round armbar over Lauren Mueller, who was later cut by the UFC as well. So I just think it's going to be a striking match. Neither of them have a ton of finishing potential on the feet. I don't think either's really going to look to grapple. If one of them did, I think it would be Wu Yanan who could land a takedown here because I think she could take advantage of Pudilova's defensive grappling holes as that was a big issue for her last time she was in the UFC, but overall, I would rather just bet this fight by split decision or parlay the over, and that's potentially going to be a Juice Boy parlay anchor for me this week come Saturday. And here's where the pay-per-view card really starts to pick up. We have a fun matchup in the bantamweight division between Merab Dvalishvili coming in as a small favorite, -130. The comeback on Jose Aldo, the king of Rio, is +110. And I gotta say, I think Jose Aldo's getting a bit disrespected here in terms of his finishing potential. So the first thing I'll say is that there are finish-only markets where you can get Jose Aldo at a pretty nice price tag. I personally bet him on FanDuel. There they have it as decision no bet at -126. I just think if a finish is going to materialize on either side, I think it's far more likely to be on the Jose Aldo side, especially like looking at Dvalishvili, his fighting style. He's just so reckless entering the pocket, relentless with those takedowns, and that's why we love him is the high motor, the relentless aggressive wrestling pace. He's a great round winner, but in terms of his defensive holes, I think we saw that come to fruition against Marlon Moraes, who was basically had him out on his feet like twice. Somehow he was able to work through that, dominated him in the second round, got the finish. But I think against Jose Aldo here, a guy that's historically had a 90% takedown defense, I think that's going to help him out. Yes, I think Dvalishvili could still land a few takedowns here, and I think he will. But I think Jose Aldo is going to make him work for those and potentially find him coming in, just getting a little bit too reckless and potentially hurting him. Dvalishvili, it wasn't just the Moraes fight. We've seen him multiple times get kind of wobbled, so he just makes me very nervous, his fighting style. Even though it's great in terms of round winning ability, it's great in terms of DraftKings, and I'm not going to ignore that. He's still going to be a big play for me on DraftKings because he's got such a high ceiling anytime he's on the slate. But just in terms of betting, I think Jose Aldo is where the value is. I backed him for a unit by knockout at +500 on FanDuel. I think that's a great number. And then, of course, the finish-only market decision no bet on FanDuel as well at -126. So I'm hoping the underdog can pull this one off. I'm going to target both sides on DraftKings, but I think clearly the betting value is on the Jose Aldo side. Which brings us to our co-main event between Paulo Costa, -345 favorite, and the return of Luke Rockhold on the comeback at +285. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because I think the biggest thing it comes down to is Rockhold just simply can't really take a punch at this stage in his career. And now he's coming off a 3.5-year layoff, and he couldn't really take a punch before that. Now he's 38 years old. He's been knocked out 5 times in his career. 3 of those were inside the first round. Now he's facing one of the heaviest hitters in the middleweight division in Paulo Costa. 11 of his 13 wins have all come by knockout, 8 of which have come inside the first round. So I just really think, all the other stuff aside, like I don't want to get too wrapped up in the dynamics here because similar to the Josh Quinlan, Jason Witt fight a couple weeks ago where it's like, oh, well, Witt could potentially take him down. He's probably the better grappler here. And I think Rockhold, maybe we think the same things here, but it just doesn't matter because I think at some point, just like in the Witt fight, I think Paulo Costa is going to connect here with Rockhold, and I don't think Rockhold is going to be able to survive. So I got Paulo Costa winning by knockout in round 1. He's obviously a strong target on DraftKings this week as well. Which brings us to our main event. Kamaru Usman, a minus 380 favorite. The comeback on Leon Edwards is plus 310. And I know there's a lot of Leon Edwards love out there, but I personally can't get there. I mean, I don't really see the upside for him here against Kamaru Usman, who's just historically not only a great round winner, but he's also got the wrestling to fall back on if he needs it. Great control grappler. His jab has really just been the difference. That's what's made him a champion over the last few years, the evolution in his striking improvements. And these guys fought back in 2015. It was Usman's first fight out of the Ultimate Fighter house. He won that fight pretty dominantly against Leon Edwards, and that was before all of the improvements in his striking. He relied heavily on the wrestling there. He was able to hold Edwards against the fence for extended periods, landed 6 takedowns, controlled him for over 10 minutes in that fight. And again, that was before he really even had the striking to go with it. Now he just has the full big picture game. I just think he could win this fight wherever the fight goes, outside of like a big head kick fluke style knockout here. I think Edwards is drawing pretty slim. So I like the Kamaru Usman side. He's obviously a great target on DraftKings. He's going to come with a lot of ownership, but ownership that I'm mostly okay with eating this week. And as always, guys, check out fightnumbers.com, where I'll have ownership projections, DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier, line movement page, fantasy points per minute. It's all completely free. Fightnumbers.com. Check it out. I definitely appreciate it. And quick note, Friday night at 7 Eastern, head on over to the Mayo Media Network YouTube page, where I'm going to be going live doing a Q&A, answering any betting or DraftKings related questions on the Mayo Media Network YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe over there so you don't miss it. Again, that's Friday night at 7 Eastern. Come and bring your questions. As always, hit the like button if you ignored me earlier and didn't already. I definitely appreciate the support, guys. Best of luck, and we'll see you next time.